Yeah, I'm back. So in the last one, I just kind of like explained the basics of APIs, REST APIs, just a rough overview. I'm sharing my screen now. Let's take a look at some of the popular third-party providers we use that we would need to integrate on a day-to-day basis, right? So looking at Flutter Wave, for example, this is their documentation. When you want to make a request to Flutter Wave, you are going to be making a request using the REST API protocol. Like I said, the REST API is just a set of standards, right? Some guys just say, oh, these, or a group of people came together and they're like, these are the ways you should call the system. These are the standards you should use, the post, the get. I would explain it in more details, but these are the ways you should call this system so that everyone, so when I'm integrating a new software, I don't have to be designing everything from scratch. So just stick to those standards, right? So there are many tools you need to integrate. There are Pista, Flutter Wave, Mono, NIBSS, Smile ID. There are a lot of tools that on a day-to-day basis you might want to implement. But then if you don't really understand how this REST API works, it will be a little bit difficult for you to talk to your devs as they're integrating it, or to even design documents around it, or to even read these documentations yourself. Yeah, as a product manager, you should be able to read documentations. So looking at the Flutter Wave documentation, we can just going through it. You can just go there, developer.flutterwave.com, go through it, see some of the APIs, see how it's called. At the end of this course, you have more context on many of these. You'll be able to read it yourself. You can go to Pista, go to NIBSS. Let's go to Pista. See, I just go through it, make a post request, sample response. So yeah, you cannot do without REST APIs. I think I'm already over shalaye that you cannot do without REST APIs. One important thing to note about REST API that differentiates it from other types of API is that they are stateless. And by stateless, it means that the front end and the back end don't maintain the state of each other. They don't know, they don't store, they are not aware of each other beyond the request. So the front end, if you remember when I talked about the internet, I explained how the internet is, where it's stored, how data access. So in this case, when the front end sends a request to the back end looks at the request, and that request in itself is complete. It contains everything the front end needs to identify the front end. Everything the back end is rather to identify the front end. Maybe the user ID, the user token, the username, whatever information it needs. So the back end does not need to store information about the front end in itself, in the states. I'll explain it more as we work on some projects within the course, within this module. But yeah, that's very important for REST APIs. So how do we typically interact with APIs? Developers interact with APIs mostly using code, right? We write code, we write scripts to communicate with these APIs. However, there are tools you can use like Postman, even the browser itself, some browser plugins. There are a lot of tools you can use to communicate to an API without having to write code. We are going to write code in this one before we use Postman. So you have more context on what's really going on behind the scene when an API is called. So there's an embedded code ID into the classroom. And the right content, we'll open it up. We'll write code, we'll call an API, we'll get a response. And from there, we'll go on to using Postman. See you in the next content.